What do UFOs possibly have to do with the simulation hypothesis? Because I know you're obviously, one of the main progenitors of the simulation hypothesis, but you're also very interested in UFOs, and you know a lot of the sort of top thinkers on that subject as well.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time with different folks in the UFO community, and I'm an advisor to the Galileo Project and peripherally involved with the Soul Project as well at Stanford. And one of the problems is that it seems that UFOs act in such absurd ways that we can't often take it completely seriously, from a scientific point of view, because it doesn't sound always like we're talking about a physical thing. Sometimes it is a physical thing and sometimes it isn't. So Jacques Vallée told me about this case that really got me thinking, and it was somewhere in like Northern California or Oregon, where there's these tall redwood trees. And he said the witnesses said that the UFO had come down at a 45-degree angle and it had left some marks on the ground. And so everybody came and investigated, and then all the other investigators left, but Jacques stayed behind. And he asked them, well, you said it came down at a 45-degree angle, but that would mean it would have had to cut through the redwood trees. I mean, these are tall trees. And they're like, yeah, it did that, but we didn't want to say that because we would sound crazy if we said that, right? So when you have something that's cutting through physical matter and then suddenly it becomes more physical, to me, that reminded me of either a holographic projection or rendering within a video game, right? Within a video game, while you're rendering, you can become semi-transparent. You can walk through walls. But then once you're rendered in the world, you can't go through the wall anymore. You're in like that physical state. And so it's possible that UFOs are being projected into this world, and then they become part of the world. So I'm not saying UFOs aren't physical.
In the Platonic sense, they might be hyperobjects that exist outside of the cave, meant to be glimpsed, so there's something higher to aspire to, outside of the bounds of the narrow simulation you're in. They scramble your brain a bit and raise your consciousness, causing you to contemplate higher realms. This is a thesis that Dr. James Madden fleshes out in his great book Unidentified Flying Hyperobjects. Empirically, it also just seems like UFOs have access to the information substrate of the universe itself. They can materialize and dematerialize at will, and seem to skip across time. They're probably way more concerned with time and timelines than they are specific individuals in their lives. And maybe this whole worldview has a thing or two to do with secret UFO government programs. After all, Diana Pasulka's source in her new book Encounters was the daughter of somebody who she thought was in a secret space program. One thing that will always give me the chills from that account is that her father would constantly refer to the word simulacra at lunch tables with his colleagues.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed.
Deja vu.
What did you just say?
Nothing, just had a little deja vu.
Switch, APOC.
What is it?
A deja vu is usually a glitch in the Matrix. It happens when they change something.
It was actually a speech by Philip K. Dick that got me thinking along these lines, because he had a famous speech in Metz, France, where he said, "We are living in a computer-programmed reality." And that's the famous line. But then he said, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed, some alteration occurs in our reality. And so basically what he was saying is you can go back and change the timeline, change the variable, and rerun the timeline. And he came to believe that his novel turned into a very well-known series called The Man in the High Castle, which was about Germany and Japan winning World War II. He came to believe that was a real timeline, not just something he had imagined, right? And he came to believe that the simulators actually decided to rerun another timeline, and they liked this timeline better, that this timeline has gone on further. So it gets back to this idea that not only could there be multiple timelines, but they could be cut off at certain points. And that's what we do in computer science. That's what we do. Like if an AI is playing a video game against you, it might project forward to see what the best outcomes are. And then it will trim the tree, if you will, so that it will just go forward.
Speaking of Philip K. Dick, I know you're friends with his wife. Yeah. He wrote another book called The Adjustment Team about somebody that a team that has more root access than we would, if you will, and they can sort of, mess with timelines. And, somebody gets to the office early and they're sort of, they're doing their thing and it's a freeze frame. And so, do you think that's possible? Do you think that there are sort of timeline manipulators out there?
I think so. Tessa, his wife, she told me that he came up with the idea for that story, which eventually became the movie, The Adjustment Bureau, with Matt Damon and Emily Blunt, because he went into the bathroom and there was a light that he had turned on and off many times. Like he thought it was like a chain, if you remember the old chains, but it had been replaced with a light switch. And so he began to wonder, did somebody change this out while I wasn't here? Because I've turned this light on 100 times and I know it was a chain and now it's a light switch, or the other way around. I forget exactly which way it was, but it was different. Right. And so that's when he began to wonder about that. And if you listen to that full speech of Philip K. Dick from Metz, France, what he's saying is these alterations would occur in our reality. We would have the sense that we were rerunning the same events, that we were saying the same things, we were experiencing the same things, we would have the same things, we would have a sense of deja vu. And he said, this is a clue that at some point in the past, a variable was changed and the simulation was run forward. And so he ended up using almost the exact same language. And I didn't know this when I was choosing the term clue on a treasure hunt, that says maybe the future is sending us clues about where we might want to end up. And maybe that's what UFOs are. It's people from the future sending back, or not necessarily people, but entities from the future, sending back information about where they want us to go. And maybe there's multiple ones sending us back.
So human evolution is almost about being able to pick the best possible timeline or something. It's like you're optimizing timelines, you're improving timelines continuously or something.
Right. What if today we think World War II has happened and this is, it's a fixed past and there's going to be a future from here. But what if this is just one run of the simulation and we're trying to optimize, something? So what is the optimization function that we're trying to optimize by running multiple timelines, that we are the simulators in this case? And it could be that we are doing that all the time. We are basically sensing these multiple futures. And how could we sense these futures if they haven't happened yet?
Right. I don't know. And
unless they actually have happened as little runs of a simulation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that is the difference between a human brain and AI, is we sort of have these intuitions with low sample size data or no data.
Right.
And sometimes it's a totally irrational decision, but it just sort of feels right and it ends up working out. And nobody, we don't have like a neuroscientific model as to how that works. And so this is a really interesting model. And so I guess if you are a human playing this sort of game, are you just trying to look out for what resonates with you and like be in touch with your instincts or something? Or like, because presumably, right, I'm not Laplace's demon and I can't know, at least in my own little branch of the multiverse or even, block universe, I can't know exactly what decision is going to end up optimally for me or for the world. And so do you just have to sort of go with what resonates with you? You have to almost develop that sense for, possibly what you've experienced in the future or something?
Yeah, I think so. It's like a future memory in a sense. You're sensing what is the best outcome. Now, best is a relative term. Just like earlier I talked about an enjoyable illusion. The world is enjoyable, but enjoyable only in the sense that you're going to have to experience all this stuff. Similarly here, it's possible that as you're playing the game, the way we play video games is we have quests and we choose quests, and certain quests are more difficult than others, right? And it's possible that we end up choosing a very difficult quest or a difficult storyline. It could be that we hamstring our character with a physical handicap right at the beginning, but maybe that's an indication of a much higher level player than those of us who don't have physical handicaps, because now they want to play it in hard mode, right? Or difficult mode. So they've cranked up that difficulty level. So I think we are sensing these futures and we have to be careful. This is why I think this idea of NPC mode comes into play, because sometimes we're just, we get so influenced from the people around us, right? I mean, you spent time in Silicon Valley. I've spent time in Silicon Valley. And you start to think differently. You start to think, everyone wants to start the next unicorn, the next billion-dollar company, and that becomes the priority. Whereas if you spend time in New York or Hollywood, you're worried about the next film or whatever, but you get so influenced by the environment around you that you start to make decisions based on that rather than an internal intuition.
Yeah.
And Steven Spielberg, says he teaches his kids that the best intuitions are like whispers, but you in order to tune into the whisper, you have to tune out all the loud noise all around you. And so sometimes we're just making decisions based on this programming that we have. Oh, okay, this job will pay me more than that, therefore I'm just going to go with this job, right? But in fact, this other job will be in a place where you won't be stressed out, and maybe that's where you're meant to be. And so I think you have to separate out what I call genuine clues, which could be messages from the future, if you take sort of a quantum physics approach. If you're more spiritual or new age, you might say guardian angels are sending you these messages, or you might say it's the adjustment team that's working with you from a Philip K. Dick science fiction perspective. But one way or another, we get these intuitions, and I think they are about the experiences that we might have at some point in the future.